The stars around Earth suddenly changed. Where empty space had been moments before, massive ships appeared like dark clouds blocking out the light. Each ship was longer than Earth's biggest cities and covered in weapons that could destroy planets. Admiral Park Soo-jin stood in the command center on Luna, Earth's moon, watching the screens with growing concern. She had never seen ships this large before. Her officers counted them quickly. Over 2,000 alien vessels had just appeared at the edge of their solar system. "Ma'am, we're getting a transmission," said her communications officer. His hands shook as he worked the controls. On the main screen, a creature appeared that made everyone in the room step back. It looked like a giant lizard walking on two legs with red eyes that seemed to burn with anger. Sharp teeth filled its mouth and scars covered its dark green skin. This was Warlord Vextar, though the humans did not know his name yet. "I am the commander of the Drakari Empire's 4th Conquest Fleet," the creature said in perfect English, though his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "Your species will surrender within 72 hours. Submit now and your deaths will be quick. Resist and we will make your entire race suffer before you die." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in complete silence. Admiral Park Soo-jin had fought in 3 different wars, but she had never faced anything like this. The alien ships made humanity's entire fleet look like toys. "How did they learn our language?" asked Dr. Kim Ji-hoon, the science officer. He was young but very smart, and his job was to study alien life if they ever found it. Now he wished they never had. "They have been watching us," Admiral Park Soo-jin said quietly. "Probably for years. They know everything about us, but we know nothing about them." Captain Lee Min-ho was patrolling near Jupiter when the alien fleet appeared. His ship, the Iron Will, was one of humanity's best warships, but it looked tiny compared to the alien vessels. His crew gathered around him on the bridge waiting for orders. "Captain, what do we do?" asked his weapons officer, a young woman named Yoon Nari who had joined the crew just 6 months ago. She tried to sound brave, but her voice shook. Lee Min-ho looked at the alien fleet on his screens. Any sane person would run away, but something inside him refused to accept defeat. "We fight," he said simply. His crew looked at each other with surprise. They all knew they could not win against such a large enemy force. But one by one, they nodded their agreement. If their captain wanted to fight, they would fight beside him. Back on Luna, Admiral Park Soo-jin called an emergency meeting with the leaders of all human colonies. The meeting took place through video screens since there was no time to travel between worlds. Representatives from 47 different planets appeared on the screens around her. "You have all seen the alien fleet," she began. "They want us to surrender in 3 days. I need to know what each world wants to do." The colony leaders talked among themselves for several minutes. These people had built new worlds from nothing. They had survived disasters, alien diseases, and wars between themselves. They were not the kind of people who gave up easily. Governor Han Yejin of New Geneva spoke first. She was a diplomat who had helped end the last war between human colonies. "On New Geneva, we vote to fight. We will not surrender to aliens who threaten to kill us all." One by one, the other colony leaders gave the same answer. Every single human world chose to fight, even though they all knew they would probably lose. Engineer Choi Dong-woo was working in the shipyards above Earth when he heard about the alien ultimatum. He was building new ships for the human fleet, but his work seemed pointless now. What good were human ships against aliens who could build vessels the size of mountains? But instead of giving up, Choi Dong-woo began thinking about how to make human ships better. He had studied the video of the alien fleet carefully and noticed something interesting. The alien ships were very large and heavily armed, but they moved slowly. Human ships were much smaller and faster. Maybe being small is not always bad, he said to himself as he began drawing new designs. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon spent hours studying the alien transmission, trying to learn everything he could about the creatures who wanted to destroy humanity. He noticed that the alien leader had scars all over his body, suggesting these creatures liked to fight. Their ships all looked the same, which meant they probably all thought the same way. "They are hunters," he told Admiral Park Soo-jin during their private meeting. "They enjoy killing weaker species. But what happens when the prey fights back?" On the alien flagship World Ender, Warlord Vextar was confident that the humans would surrender soon. He had conquered over 300 worlds for the Drakari Empire, and the pattern was always the same. First, he would show his massive fleet to frighten the enemy. Then he would give them time to think about how hopeless their situation was. Finally, they would surrender to save their lives. "How long until the humans contact us with their surrender?" asked his second-in-command scout leader Krindal. 2 days at most, Vextar replied, cleaning his claws with a sharp blade. They are weak creatures. Our scouts have been watching them for years. They fight among themselves over small things. They will not unite to fight us. But Vextar was wrong about humans. In the 72 hours he had given them, humanity did something that surprised everyone, including themselves. Instead of preparing to surrender, they prepared for war. Every human ship in space moved toward Earth to join the defense fleet. Weapons factories worked day and night to build new missiles and guns. Even civilian ships were armed with whatever weapons could be found. When the 3 days ended, Admiral Park Soo-jin sent humanity's response to the alien fleet. It was short and simple. We invite you to try. Warlord Vextar could not believe what he was hearing. No species had ever refused his ultimatum before. These humans were either very brave or very stupid. He would soon find out which one was true. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin. Warlord Vextar stared at the human response message, reading it again and again. In 300 conquests, no species had ever told him to try. They always begged for mercy or offered to become slaves. These humans were different, and that made him angry. They must not understand how powerful we are, he told Scout Leader Krindal. We will show them what happens when inferior beings refuse to obey the Empire. Vextar chose New Geneva as his target. It was a mining colony on the edge of human space with only 2 million people living there. He would destroy it completely to show the other humans what would happen to them if they continued to resist. The attack began 3 days after the human refusal. 50 Drakari warships dropped out of hyperspace above New Geneva and immediately began bombing the planet from orbit. Their energy weapons turned mountains into glass and boiled away lakes in seconds. Governor Han Yejin was in the colony's command center when the first bombs fell. She had been a diplomat before coming to New Geneva, someone who solved problems with words instead of weapons, but now she watched her peaceful world being destroyed, and she felt something change inside her. All civilians to the underground shelters, she ordered through the colony's communication system. This is not a drill. We are under attack. But the people of New Geneva surprised her. Instead of running and hiding, many of them grabbed whatever weapons they could find and prepared to fight. Miners brought explosives from the deep tunnels. Construction workers turned their heavy machines into weapons. Even teenagers too young to join the military picked up guns and stood ready to defend their homes. Colonel Yoon Nari had been visiting New Geneva to train the local defense force when the attack began. She was a small woman, but she had fought in more battles than most soldiers twice her size. When she saw the alien ships in the sky, she knew the colony could not win, but she also knew they had to try. Listen to me, she told the colonists who gathered around her. We cannot fight their ships in space, but if they send soldiers to the ground, we can make them pay for every step they take. The orbital bombing continued for 6 hours. When it finally stopped, much of New Geneva was burning ruins, but the underground shelters had protected most of the population, and the colonists were still ready to fight. Vextar expected the humans to surrender after seeing their cities destroyed. Instead, he received another message from Governor Han Yejin. New Geneva still stands. Come down and take it if you can. This made Vextar even angrier. He sent 10,000 Drakari soldiers to the planet's surface, expecting them to capture the colony in a few hours. The Drakari were bigger and stronger than humans, with thick scales that could stop most bullets. They had conquered countless worlds with their superior physical power, but the humans of New Geneva did not fight like other species. Instead of meeting the aliens in open battle, they hid in the ruins of their city and attacked from unexpected places. When Drakari soldiers entered a building, explosives would go off. When they walked down a street, snipers would shoot at them from hidden positions. Colonel Yoon Nari led the defense with tactics she had learned fighting human rebels years before. She divided the colonists into small groups that moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough for the aliens to find them. Each group knew the colony better than the invaders did, using secret tunnels and hidden paths to attack and then disappear. Engineer Choi Dongwoo was not on New Geneva, but he watched the battle from his workshop above Earth. He saw how the human defenders used the colony's own machinery against the invaders. Mining robots became bombs that rolled toward alien soldiers. Construction equipment was turned into mobile weapons that could move through the ruins. They are turning their tools into weapons, he said to himself. If colonists can do that, what can we do with real warships? Meanwhile, Captain Lee Minho was leading his small fleet in hit-and-run attacks against the Drakari ships surrounding New Geneva. The Iron Will and 5 other human vessels would appear suddenly, fire all their weapons at one alien ship, then disappear into the asteroid belt before the enemy could respond. Lee Minho knew his ships could not destroy the large Drakari vessels, but he could damage them. Each attack taught him more about alien weaknesses. Their ships were powerful but slow to turn. Their weapons were devastating but took time to aim. Most importantly, they did not expect small, fast ships to attack them repeatedly. Hit them and run, he told his fleet commanders. Make them angry. Make them make mistakes. The battle for New Geneva lasted 3 weeks. In that time, the Drakari lost over 2,000 soldiers trying to capture a single human colony. Every building had to be taken by force. Every street was defended by colonists who refused to surrender. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon studied reports from the battle and made an important discovery. The Drakari were not just physically superior to humans, they were also used to easy victories. When species surrendered quickly, the aliens did not have to learn how to fight real wars, but humans were teaching them that conquering was not the same as fighting. Look at their tactics, he explained to Admiral Park Soo-jin. They use the same attacks over and over. When something does not work, they just try harder instead of trying something different. They do not know how to adapt. Finally, the Drakari captured New Geneva, but it was a hollow victory. The colony was completely destroyed, and most of its useful equipment had been moved to safety or destroyed by the defenders. Worse for the aliens, they had lost more soldiers in one battle than in their last 10 conquests combined. Vextar stood in the ruins of the colony's government building, trying to understand what had happened. These humans should have been easy to defeat. They were smaller and weaker than Drakari warriors. Their weapons were less advanced than Empire technology, but they had fought harder than any enemy he had ever faced. "The survivors, sir?" asked one of his officers. "What should we do with them?" Vextar looked around at the destruction. Fewer than 50,000 colonists had survived the battle, but they still looked at him with hatred instead of fear. Even defeat had not broken their spirit. "Take them to the prison ships," he ordered. "Maybe the other humans will be more reasonable when they see what happened here." But when news of New Geneva's fall reached the other human worlds, it did not make them want to surrender. Instead, it made them angry. These aliens had destroyed a peaceful mining colony that had never threatened anyone. If the Drakari could do that to New Geneva, they would do it to every human world. Captain Lee Minho received new orders from Admiral Park Soo-jin. Continue attacking the alien fleet around New Geneva, but now focus on rescuing the survivors being taken to prison ships. His small fleet had become heroes to humanity, proof that the aliens could be hurt. On his flagship, Vextar realized that his plan to frighten humanity had failed completely. Instead of making the humans surrender, destroying New Geneva had made them more determined to fight. For the first time in his long military career, he began to worry that he might have made a serious mistake. Scout leader Krindal brought him reports from their spies throughout human space. Instead of preparing to surrender, every human world was building weapons and training soldiers. Their entire civilization was transforming itself for war. "Perhaps we should request reinforcements from the Empire," Krindal suggested carefully. Vextar's pride would not let him admit he needed help to defeat primitive humans. "No," he said. "We will crush them ourselves. But first, we need to understand how they fight so differently from other species." The war was just beginning, and already it was not going the way anyone had expected. The news from New Geneva spread across all human worlds within hours. Admiral Park Soo-jin stood before the emergency council meeting, looking at the faces of colony leaders on screens around her. Instead of fear, she saw anger in their eyes. "They destroyed an entire world just to scare us," said Governor Chen of Titan Base, his voice shaking with rage. "New Geneva never had any military targets. It was just families trying to build a better life. Then we make them pay for it," Admiral Park Soo-jin replied. Her calm voice carried a steel edge that made everyone listen carefully. "As of today, the entire Terran coalition is at war. Every factory, every shipyard, every resource we have goes to the war effort." Dr. Kim Ji-hoon had spent days studying the Drakari attack patterns and prisoner interrogations from the survivors of New Geneva. What he discovered changed everything humanity thought about their enemy. "They are not prepared for a real war," he explained to the military commanders. For hundreds of years, they have been bullying weaker species that surrender quickly. They know how to destroy planets and scare people, but they do not know how to fight an enemy that fights back. Engineer Choi Dong-woo took this information and ran with it. In his workshop above Earth, he worked 20 hours a day designing new weapons and ship modifications. His team of engineers came from all over human space, bringing ideas that no single world could have developed alone. "Look at their ships," he said, pointing to captured video footage. "They are built to look scary and carry huge weapons, but they are not built for fighting other warships. They expect their enemies to run away, not shoot back." The first new human ships rolled out of the orbital shipyards just 6 weeks after New Geneva fell. They were smaller than Drakari vessels but much faster. Instead of trying to match alien firepower, they used speed and numbers to overwhelm individual targets. Captain Lee Min-ho was chosen to test the new ship designs. His iron will had been refitted with Choi Dong-woo's improvements: better engines, smarter weapons, and armor that could absorb energy attacks and use that power to fire back at enemies. "It feels different," he told his crew as they took the upgraded ship on its first mission, "like it wants to fight instead of just survive." Colonel Yoon Nari had escaped from New Geneva during the final battle, but she had not forgotten the colonists who died defending their homes. Now she trained soldiers on every human world, teaching them the guerrilla tactics that had made the Drakari pay so heavily for their victory. "Remember what happened on New Geneva," she told each new group of recruits. "We cannot match them in size or strength, but we can be smarter, faster, and more determined. Every one of them that falls makes the rest more afraid." The war's turning point came when Captain Lee Min-ho's fleet captured a Drakari scout ship intact. The alien vessel had been damaged in a battle and forced to land on an asteroid for repairs. Instead of destroying it, the humans boarded and captured the crew alive. Scout leader Krindal found himself in a human prison cell, facing interrogation by diplomat Han Yejin, who had been rescued from New Geneva and was now helping the war effort. She spoke to him in his own language, which surprised him. "How do you know Drakari speech?" he demanded. "We are fast learners," Han Yejin replied calmly. "We have been studying your people ever since you arrived. Tell me, how many worlds has your empire conquered without a fight?" Krindal's pride made him boastful. "Hundreds. Most species beg for mercy when they see our fleet. They know they cannot win against the Empire's power. But you have never fought a war that lasted more than a few weeks," Han Yejin observed. "What happens when your enemy does not surrender? What happens when they get stronger instead of weaker?" The captured scout ship gave humanity its greatest intelligence prize. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon's team took it apart piece by piece, learning how Drakari technology worked. More importantly, they discovered that the aliens had very rigid thinking patterns. Their tactics manual had not been updated in over 50 years because they never needed new ideas. They always do the same things in the same order. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon reported to Admiral Park Soo-jin. "First they show their fleet to frighten enemies. Then they demand surrender. If that fails, they attack the weakest target to make an example. They have no plan for what to do if none of that works." Engineer Choi Dong-woo used the captured alien technology to upgrade human weapons even further. But instead of copying Drakari designs, he improved them. Human creativity found ways to make alien technology work better than its original makers had imagined. The first major human victory came 4 months after New Geneva fell. Captain Lee Min-ho led a fleet of 30 ships against a Drakari supply convoy, bringing reinforcements to their main fleet. Using the aliens' own technology against them, the human ships appeared from hyperspace in perfect formation and destroyed 12 enemy vessels before they could react. "Impossible," Warlord Vextar said when he received the report. "Humans do not have ships that advanced." "They are using our own technology, sir," his intelligence officer reported nervously. "But they have modified it in ways we never considered. Their ships are now faster and more heavily armed than ours." For the first time since the war began, Vextar felt something he had never experienced in battle: doubt. These humans were not fighting like any species he had conquered before. Instead of getting weaker as the war continued, they were getting stronger. Admiral Park Soo-jin saw the victory reports and knew this was their chance to take the initiative. Instead of just defending human worlds, she ordered attacks on Drakari positions throughout their territory. Small human fleets struck at alien bases, supply lines, and isolated ships. always hitting hard and fast before disappearing. Make them afraid to leave their big ships, she ordered her fleet commanders. Make them wonder where we will strike next. Make them realize that they are not hunters anymore. They are being hunted. The strategy worked. Drakari forces began staying closer together for protection, which made them less effective at conquering new worlds. Their rigid command structure could not adapt to fighting an enemy that attacked from everywhere at once. Colonel Yoon Nari led the first successful rescue mission to free survivors from the New Geneva prison ships. Her strike force used captured Drakari equipment to sneak aboard the prison vessels and fought a running battle through their corridors. When they escaped with over 3,000 rescued colonists, the entire human fleet celebrated. "We are not just fighting to survive anymore," Admiral Park Soo-jin announced to the Coalition Council. "We are fighting to win, and for the first time since this war began, I believe we actually can." On his flagship, Vextar looked at the tactical displays showing human attacks across dozens of star systems. His invasion force, once numbering over 2,000 ships, was now down to barely half that number. Worse, his superiors in the Empire were starting to ask uncomfortable questions about why the conquest was taking so long. "Request reinforcements," he finally ordered Scout Leader Krindol, swallowing his pride. "Tell the High Command that these humans are more challenging than expected." But even as he sent the message, Vextar wondered if reinforcements would be enough. These humans had turned from prey into predators in just a few months. If they could do that much damage to his fleet, what would they do with more time? The answer to that question would come sooner than he expected. 8 months had passed since the war began, and the Drakari Empire was learning what it meant to fight humanity. Warlord Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching reports flow in from across human space. Each one brought worse news than the last. "Another supply convoy destroyed near Proxima," reported his communications officer. "The humans appeared from nowhere, destroyed 6 ships, and vanished before our response fleet arrived." Vextar's claws scraped against the metal railing as he tried to control his anger. His invasion fleet, once the pride of the Empire, was now scattered across dozens of systems, trying to defend against human attacks that came from every direction. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would disappoint him. 743 combat-ready vessels, sir," came the reply. "We have lost over half our original force." On Earth, Admiral Park Soo-jin reviewed the same battle reports from the human perspective, and she smiled for the first time in months. Her strategy of turning humanity's disadvantages into advantages was working better than anyone had dared hope. "Show me the latest intelligence on their fleet movements," she told Dr. Kim Ji-hoon, who had become her chief strategic advisor, as well as xenobiology expert. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon brought up a 3-dimensional map of local space, with red dots marking Drakari positions and blue dots showing human forces. "They are clustering their ships together for protection," he explained. "This makes them less vulnerable to our small raids, but it also means they cannot control as much territory. And it makes them predictable," Admiral Park Soo-jin added. "They are thinking like prey now, not predators." Captain Lee Min-ho had become a legend among human forces. His ship, the Iron Will, had been rebuilt and upgraded so many times that it barely resembled the vessel he had commanded at the war's beginning. Now he led a strike force of 50 ships, all crewed by volunteers who competed for the chance to serve under him. "Target confirmed," his sensor officer announced, as they approached another Drakari position. 1 heavy cruiser and 4 destroyers guarding a supply depot on Kepler Station. "They picked a bad place to stop," Lee Min-ho said, studying the tactical display. Kepler Station sat in an asteroid field, which gave his smaller ships plenty of places to hide and attack from unexpected angles. The battle lasted only 20 minutes. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, fired their weapons, and disappeared again before the Drakari could target them effectively. When it was over, all 5 alien vessels were destroyed or crippled, and the supply depot was in human hands. Engineer Choi Dongwoo had established workshops on a dozen different worlds, each one producing new weapons and ship modifications. His teams worked around the clock, and their innovations were spreading faster than the Drakari could adapt to them. "Look at this," he said to his chief assistant, showing her the latest captured Drakari weapon. "They have been using the same basic design for over a century. No improvements, no changes, nothing new. Why would they change something that worked?" she asked. Because it only worked against enemies who gave up quickly, Choi Dongwoo replied. Now they face enemies who learn from every battle and make their weapons better. We are improving faster than they can keep up with. Colonel Yoon Nari had trained over 1 million human soldiers in the tactics that had proved successful on New Geneva. But more importantly, she had taught them something the Drakari did not understand. How to fight as individuals who supported each other, rather than as a rigid hierarchy that collapsed when leaders were killed. Every human soldier thinks for themselves, she explained to a group of new officers. When Drakari lose their commander, they become confused and easy to defeat. When we lose ours, someone else steps forward to take charge. The turning point of the war came when human forces achieved their most ambitious goal yet, the liberation of New Geneva. Admiral Park Soo-jin had been planning the operation for months, waiting for the right moment when Drakari defenses were weakest. This is not just about saving one colony, she told her fleet commanders before the battle. This is about showing the galaxy that the Drakari Empire can be defeated. Every species they have conquered needs to see that resistance is possible. The attack began with Captain Lee Min-ho's strike force destroying the Drakari patrol ships around New Geneva. While the aliens scrambled to respond, Colonel Yoon Nari led a ground assault on the planet itself, using tactics the enemy had never faced before. Instead of landing in one location and fighting toward their objectives, human forces landed everywhere at once. Small teams struck at communication centers, power stations, and command posts simultaneously, creating chaos throughout the Drakari occupation force. Where are they all coming from? Demanded the Drakari ground commander, as reports flooded in from across the planet. Every major installation was under attack at the same time, but his sensors showed only small groups of humans, not the large army he expected. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon had studied Drakari psychology extensively, and he understood their weakness. They think in terms of large forces fighting large forces, he had explained to the assault planners. They do not know how to fight an enemy that breaks into small groups and coordinates their attacks. The space battle above New Geneva was equally one-sided. Drakari ships designed to fight enemies that met them head-on could not handle human vessels that attacked from multiple directions at once. Their powerful weapons were useless against targets too small and fast to hit. Engineer Choi Dongwoo's latest innovation proved decisive. Weapons that could fire around corners and through obstacles using advanced targeting systems. Human ships no longer needed direct line of sight to hit their enemies, while Drakari vessels could only fire in straight lines. Within 6 hours, New Geneva was back in human hands. The surviving Drakari forces surrendered rather than face total destruction, giving humanity its first large group of prisoners to interrogate and study. How did you coordinate attacks across an entire planet without central communication? Scout leader Krindal asked diplomat Han Yejin during his interrogation. He had been recaptured during the battle and seemed genuinely confused by human tactics. Each team knew what the others would do because we planned together, Han Yejin replied. Your forces follow orders from above. Our forces think and adapt together. The liberation of New Geneva sent shockwaves throughout the Drakari Empire. For the first time in their history, a conquered world had been taken back from them. Worse, the humans had made it look easy, destroying or capturing an entire occupation force without significant losses. Warlord Vextar received an urgent message from the Empire's high command, demanding an explanation for his failures. The message was clear. End this war quickly or face execution for incompetence. Gather the fleet. He ordered his remaining officers. All ships, all forces. We will attack the human homeworld directly and end this rebellion once and for all. But Admiral Park Soo-jin was ready for this desperate move. Her spy networks had warned her that the Drakari were preparing for one final assault on Earth itself. Instead of being afraid, she felt a grim satisfaction that the enemy was finally coming to fight on her terms. Let them come, she told her staff officers. We have been preparing for this since the war began. Earth is not New Geneva. It is the most heavily defended world in human space. If they want to attack our home, they will find out what happens when humans fight with their backs to the wall. The stage was set for the final battle of the war. Humanity had transformed from a peaceful confederation into a military power that could match the Drakari Empire ship for ship. But the ultimate test would come when alien forces tried to conquer the birthplace of the species that refused to surrender. Captain Lee Min-ho received orders to return to Earth with all available ships. As his fleet jumped toward humanity's homeworld, He reflected on how much had changed since the war began. They were no longer the desperate defenders fighting impossible odds. They were the hunters now, and their prey was coming to them. Warlord Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship as the remnants of his once mighty fleet gathered for their final assault. 400 ships was still a massive force by human standards, but he knew it was barely half of what he had started with. The humans had taught him the meaning of defeat, and now he faced his last chance to avoid execution by his own superiors. "All ships report ready for the attack on Earth," announced his communications officer. The crew around him tried to look confident, but Vexitar could smell their fear. They had all heard the stories about what happened to Drakari forces that fought humans. "Begin the assault," Vexitar ordered, his voice carrying none of its former certainty. "Destroy their homeworld and end this war." The Drakari fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, expecting to find a lightly defended planet, protected by whatever human ships had survived their previous battles. Instead, they found something that made even veteran warriors step back in shock. Earth was surrounded by the largest defensive fleet in human history. Over 800 ships of every size and type formed protective rings around humanity's homeworld. Military vessels flew alongside converted cargo ships, passenger liners armed with improvised weapons, and even private yachts crewed by volunteers who refused to let their planet fall. Admiral Park, Sujin, watched the alien fleet arrive from her command center on Luna. She had been preparing for this moment for months, turning the entire solar system into a fortress that would make the Drakari pay for every kilometer they advanced. "All ships. This is Admiral Park," she announced over the fleet communication channel. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every human world that will exist in the future. Show them what happens when they threaten our home." Dr. Kim Ji-hoon stood beside her, studying the enemy formation. "They are making the same mistakes," he observed. "Large ships in predictable formations, expecting us to meet them in traditional battle. They still do not understand how we fight. The battle began when Drakari ships opened fire on the outer defense platforms protecting Earth's moon. Their massive energy weapons carved through space, destroying several human installations in brilliant explosions. But instead of breaking human morale, the attacks only made the defenders more determined. Captain Lee Minho led the counterattack from the bridge of his iron will. His ship had become a symbol of human resistance, upgraded and modified so many times that it was now more powerful than ships twice its size. Behind him flew 50 of humanity's best vessels, all commanded by officers who had learned to fight the Drakari way. "Remember your training," he told his fleet commanders. "Hit them fast, hit them hard, and do not let them predict where you will strike next." The human ships scattered in all directions, using the solar system's natural obstacles to their advantage. They hid behind asteroids, used the gravity of planets to slingshot into attack positions, and appeared from directions the Drakari never expected. Colonel Yoon Nari commanded the defense of Luna's surface installations. When Drakari ground forces landed on the moon, they expected to capture the facilities quickly. Instead, they found themselves fighting human soldiers who had spent months turning every building into a fortress. "This is for New Geneva," she whispered, as she personally led an assault on a Drakari landing ship. Her soldiers followed her without question, driven by memories of all the humans who had died in this war. Engineer Choi Dong-woo had one final surprise for the aliens. The orbital shipyards around Earth, which appeared to be defenseless industrial facilities, suddenly transformed into massive weapons platforms. Construction equipment became guns, manufacturing robots became missile launchers, and the entire industrial complex became a fortress that could defend itself. "Surprise," he said quietly, as he activated the defensive systems he had spent months installing in secret. The shipyards opened fire with weapons the Drakari had never seen before, turning their own construction techniques into tools of war. The space battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Drakari ships were larger and more heavily armed, but human vessels were faster and more numerous. For every human ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. Warlord Vextar watched his fleet slowly being torn apart by enemies he had once considered primitive. His tactical displays showed Drakari ships being destroyed faster than they could destroy human vessels. For the first time in his military career, he was losing a battle. "Sir, we are receiving communications from some of our own ships," reported his communications officer, confusion clear in his voice. They are asking permission to surrender. This was something Vexitar had never heard before. Drukhari warriors did not surrender. They fought until victory or death. But these humans had done something to his forces that no enemy had ever managed. They had broken their will to fight. Dr. Kim Ji-hoon had anticipated this moment. Working with diplomat Han Yejin, they had been broadcasting messages directly to individual Drukhari ships, bypassing their command structure. The messages were simple but effective. Surrender now and live, or follow your leaders to certain death. Your empire sent you here to die for their pride, the broadcasts said in perfect Drukhari language. But you do not have to die for leaders who never cared about your lives. The humans offer you a choice your own commanders never gave you. One by one, Drukhari ships began to surrender, their crews realizing that continuing to fight would only get them killed for no purpose. Some tried to flee back to hyperspace, only to find human ships waiting for them at every escape route. The turning point came when Captain Lee Minho's fleet surrounded Warlord Vexitar's flagship. The massive vessel was still dangerous, but it was outnumbered 20-1 by human ships that attacked from every direction at once. Warlord Vexitar, came a transmission from the Iron Will. This is Captain Lee Minho of the Terran fleet. Your invasion has failed. Your ships are destroyed or surrendering. Surrender now and your crew will be treated according to our laws of war. Vexitar looked around his bridge at the faces of his remaining officers. They all knew the battle was lost. Their empire's greatest invasion fleet had been destroyed by the species they had expected to conquer in a few days. "Sir?" asked his second-in-command quietly. "Your orders?" For a long moment, Vexitar said nothing. His entire life had been built around Drukhari superiority and the inevitability of their victories. Now he faced something his culture had never prepared him for. Total defeat by enemies he had considered inferior. "Signal the human fleet," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We surrender. The Battle of Earth was over. Of the 400 ships that had attacked humanity's homeworld, fewer than 50 escaped back to Drukhari space. The rest were destroyed, captured, or surrendered. The invasion force that was supposed to end human resistance had instead ended the Drukhari Empire's reputation for invincibility." Admiral Park Sujin stood in the same command center where she had first heard the alien ultimatum over a year ago. But now, instead of watching enemy ships threaten her world, she was accepting their surrender. "The war is over," she announced to the Terran Coalition Council. "Earth is safe and humanity is free." But the victory was about more than just survival. News of the human victory spread quickly to all the worlds the Drukhari Empire had conquered. Species that had been slaves for generations began to rebel, inspired by the example of humans who had refused to surrender and won their freedom through determination and courage. 3 years later, Dr. Kim Ji-hoon stood in the same laboratory where he had first studied Drukhari transmissions. But now he was working with former enemies, including scout leader Krindal, who had chosen to help build a new galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. "Your people did something remarkable," Krindal told him during one of their research sessions. "You showed the galaxy that the Empire could be defeated. Without that example, my people would still be slaves to their own military leaders." Captain Lee Minho commanded a joint fleet of human and former Drukhari vessels, patrolling space that had once been the Empire's territory. Many of his officers were aliens who had chosen freedom over the old ways of conquest and oppression. Colonel Yoon Nari ran training centers where humans taught defensive tactics to newly liberated species, showing them how to protect themselves from future empires that might try to conquer them. Engineer Choi Dongwoo worked with alien scientists to develop technology for exploration and building, rather than conquest and destruction. The same creativity that had won the war was now being used to improve life for everyone. Admiral Park Sujin, now commanding the combined fleets of the Galactic Federation, reflected on how much had changed since that first alien ultimatum. Humanity had not only survived an impossible war, but had inspired other species to claim their own freedom. The Empire had expected surrender and found war at humanity's gates. But more than that, they had found something that would outlast any empire: the refusal to accept defeat and the determination to fight for freedom, no matter the odds. In the end, it was not superior weapons or larger fleets that had won the war. It was the simple human belief that some things were worth fighting for.